finally speaking up last night, Joni Lamb's nephew revealed something that will stun you for years to come. The truth is finally being revealed about certain things that were previously only known by the Lamb family. We get a closer glimpse of one of the most significant families in Christian media thanks to his startling admission. Prepare yourself for some startling information that will alter your perception of Daystar and Joni Lamb. Don't overlook this startling assertion. Rebecca Lamb had always had a tight relationship with her mother, Joni Lamb. The course of events was unanticipated until Marcus Lamb's untimely death in 2021. The youngest daughter, Rebecca, had never held out when she felt something wasn't right and had always been quite outspoken. This time, it concerned Joni's association with Dr. Doug Weiss, a family friend and Christian marriage counselor. Rebecca felt that things were moving too quickly after learning that her mother was seeing Doug. She was concerned about the timing as much as the relationship's speed. Rebecca believed her mother wasn't allowing herself enough time to grieve appropriately because Marcus hadn't been dead for long. In addition to being mentally irresponsible, Rebecca believed that beginning a new relationship so soon after Marcus's passing was detrimental to the family's reputation. Particularly through the Daystar network, the Lamb family had always been seen as deeply religious, loyal to their Christian principles, and dedicated to their mission. Rebecca believed that those principles might become less significant in light of Joni's new relationship. She reasoned that because people would not understand how a Christian leader could move on so rapidly, they would begin to question the leadership of the Lamb family. The concern was not limited to personal feelings for Doug. Rebecca feared that Marcus Lamb's legacy and the ministry that had been established over the years would be destroyed by her mother's choices. While Joni and Doug first started dating, Rebecca made an effort to be composed and straightforward while discussing her concerns. She wanted to let Joni know what might happen if she followed her thoughts, not to give her mother instructions. Rebecca opened up to Joni about her concerns, so that they could discuss them openly. However, Joni's response fell short of Rebecca's expectations. Joni appeared combative and indifferent rather than receptive to her daughter's feelings. It became immediately apparent that Joni would not alter her course of action. Because Rebecca felt as though her concerns about the relationship were not being taken seriously, this strained the relationship. Rebecca believed that speaking up was her only option. If it was tough, she didn't hesitate to declare what she believed to be right. However, the mother and daughter grew increasingly irate with one another as their relationship deepened. Rebecca was upset not only about the connection, but also about how it was altering her family's working methods. Previously, the family would decide jointly, but as time went on, Joni began to make more decisions by herself. Rebecca was uneasy about this shift of authority, and it wasn't just Doug. Rebecca believed that Daystar's future and their family's honor were on the line. Joni seemed to dig in her heels the more Rebecca spoke up, despite the fact that she did so frequently. Their mental distance widened as a result. As Rebecca spoke up more about her concerns regarding her mother's relationship with Doug Weiss, Joni and Rebecca's issues had been growing worse for months. What had started out as a slight discomfort, a nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right, had now escalated into a full-on altercation. Joni and Marcus Lamb have a daughter named Rebecca. She has always been the one to voice her opinions, and she had no intention of changing her mind on this matter. One evening in May 2023, just before Joni and Doug's wedding, it all came to a climax. At last, they had the conversation Rebecca had been dreading and perhaps anticipating. There was no calm time when they could sit down and work things out, and nobody had planned for it to happen. Rather, the emotional outburst occurred during a private argument that neither the mother nor the girl could have anticipated. Rebecca had made several attempts to speak with her mother, always with the intention of cheering her up. She had expressed her opinion that Joni was attempting to replace Marcus too soon, and that she wasn't given enough time to grieve, and that the relationship was progressing too fast. But Joni disregarded her every time. At first, it was minor, perhaps a brief rejection, a change of topic, or a silent, "You don't understand." But with time, Rebecca realized Joni wasn't interested in hearing her out. When Joni responded to her daughter's concerns, it felt as though she was rejecting her rather than only disagreeing with her. When Rebecca attempted to express her feelings, Joni appeared to become more and more reticent. As the conflicts continued, they became more intense and personal. Joni was angry, and Rebecca was upset. She believed that her mother was leaving her for a relationship that didn't align with the principles they had dedicated their entire lives to. It was about more than just a new relationship for Rebecca. It was about Marcus's legacy and their family's future. The altercation that broke out in May 2023 was not solely about Doug or even the friendship itself. It dropped somewhat more. This has to do with their past closeness and mutual trust. This was Rebecca's pivotal moment. She wasn't only upset with Joni for avoiding her. She was also upset with Joni's management of the shift, making decisions without consulting her family or considering the emotional toll it was taking on everyone. Rebecca's voice trembled with hurt and rage as she added, "I don't think you're thinking about the consequences of your actions. It's about all of us, not just about you." "I want to move on," Joni said in a defensive and almost icy tone. "It's about the church, about everything Dad worked for, and about everything we've built as a family. I don't need this right now," the woman yelled. "You don't have to lecture me." Her face flushed with rage, and Rebecca felt bad on the inside. She didn't expect an easy conversation, but this wasn't what she expected. She thought they could discuss it in a calm and reasonable manner because they were family, and it wasn't just about Doug, it was about more than that. Rebecca felt as though she wasn't being seen because Joni wouldn't listen to her or even acknowledge her feelings. As the conversation progressed, Rebecca's anger turned to disappointment because she had expected more from her mother, who had always been a rock in her life. Joni no longer seemed like a mother. Instead, she seemed like a stranger. "You're not thinking straight, Mom," she continued, her voice shaking with anger. "You're rushing into something that you haven't had time to process. It's heartbreaking to watch you do this because you're not giving yourself enough time to mourn Dad's passing." Joni's eyes turned red upon learning of Marcus's passing. "Rebecca, I'm grieving in my own way," she said. "You have no right to dictate to me how I should grieve. It wasn't just about Doug. It was about a relationship that had been built on love, trust, and respect for one another, but was collapsing more quickly." Rebecca tried again because she truly wanted her mother to understand, but the words hurt more than she had anticipated. She felt a terrible pain in her chest when she realized how far apart they had become. "I'm not trying to control your life," Rebecca said to her mother. "I simply don't want to witness you repeating the same errors." Joni looked away and said, "I'm done talking about this. I don't want to see you upset again. You don't understand. You don't get it." As her mother moved down the hall, Rebecca stood by herself in the center of their once bright house. In the days that followed, Rebecca couldn't shake the feeling that she had been abandoned. Her mother had always been an inspiration to her, and she had always looked up to her. What she believed she knew about their relationship was now being called into question. It wasn't just about Doug anymore. It was also about Joni's transformation into someone Rebecca didn't recognize. There was a dense fog in the air from everything that had been said and everything that hadn't been said. The fight wasn't just about Doug or the relationship. It was about the breakdown of family values, trust, and communication. The church, which had once brought people together and given them hope, was now shattered by personal problems and unresolved issues. The conflict between Joni and Rebecca was only one aspect of a larger picture that would continue to worsen over the next few days. What started out as a mother-daughter argument had become a painful rift in a family that had once been united in their goal and faith. And everyone was wondering if this split could ever be repaired or if the damage was too great to be repaired. Rebecca Lamb, the youngest daughter of Joni and Marcus Lamb, had always been a strong and outspoken member of her family. She was not afraid to voice her opinions, even when they were difficult. However, things began to change over time. Something much deeper was occurring that was beginning to erode their familial bonds. It wasn't just her mother's personal life changes. And as the tension between Joni and Rebecca increased, Rebecca felt increasingly isolated. The first thing that angered her was her belief that her mother was seeing Doug Weiss. Rebecca had never been quiet when she felt something was wrong, and she had expressed from the beginning that she didn't like how quickly Joni was moving on after Marcus's death. She had witnessed her mother's transformation from a woman grieving the loss of her husband to one who rushed into a relationship with Doug, believing it was too soon, that Joni hadn't had enough time to grieve, and that this new relationship went against what their family had always stood for. It seemed as though her mother was not even making an effort to understand Rebecca. She resisted more than Rebecca did, and the more Rebecca tried to persuade her mother to see what she believed was best for the family, the more alone she became. When Rebecca confided in Joni about her concerns, she never responded in a kind or honest manner. Instead, Joni became irate, claiming that Rebecca was too emotional and didn't understand what she was going through. This refusal and lack of understanding created a rift between them that grew daily. It wasn't just about Doug or the relationship. It was also about trust and a mother and daughter who had once shared a close bond but were now at odds. It became worse for Rebecca over the weeks. She felt as though she didn't belong in her own family. She was no longer close to Joni. Instead, they were far apart and hostile toward one another. It seemed as though whenever I attempted to speak or engage in conversation, it was ignored. Joni was preoccupied with her new life with Doug, and Rebecca made the decision to keep quiet because she was upset and hurt. However, her relationship with more than just her mother changed. The entire family began to change. Other family members started to despise Joni because of her developing relationship with Doug and her new focus on their future together. The stress was felt by the entire family, not just Rebecca. Rebecca, in particular, felt that she was not being taken seriously, that she was not being included in conversations where she used to be, and that she was not being included in important decisions. This division became painfully evident when Rebecca began to argue not only with Joni, but also with other family members. Her older brother Jonathan Lamb was also affected by the changes in the family's business practices. He was once believed to be Marcus's obvious heir, the one who would carry on the Lamb name. But as Joni gained more control over Daystar and partnered with Doug, it became unclear Jonathan's role in the family business, and he, too, felt excluded. Eventually, there was a significant gap between the Lamb brothers, just as there was between Joni and Rebecca. The Lambs were no longer a cohesive family, but rather a divided one, and there were whispers in the family that Rebecca was drifting away, that she was no longer involved in family matters, that her concerns were no longer being heard, and that the more she distanced herself from the family to avoid the constant arguments and fights, the more the family seemed to fall apart. But Rebecca's voice never remained silent for long, even when she was alone, and she was growing increasingly irate as she watched her family disintegrate, and she knew she could no longer remain silent. Her decision to distance herself from her family and the ministry wasn't merely a way to avoid conflict. She did it to protect her mental and emotional well-being, and her health began to suffer as a result of the stress. Not only did she feel mentally ill, but she was also becoming ill as a result of being alone. She began to feel as though she was constantly on the outside, which made her tense. She knew that the family's dissolution was not simply due to differences of opinion, but to deeper issues, such as how each person's own pain and trauma had influenced their choices. Rebecca felt as though she was losing her mother and the family she had grown up with because Joni was unable to see her concerns and increasingly relied on Doug to help her make decisions. Daystar was an organization that was once run by a family. But things were changing there, and the effects of Rebecca's increasing loneliness were starting to trickle down to other people. Being alone helped Rebecca see things more clearly, and even though the family split up hurt and annoyed her, she knew she had to step back, not just from her family but also from the church. She couldn't keep quiet and let her worries go unnoticed because she didn't want to upset anyone. When she decided to pull back, she didn't just want to stay away from her family. She also wanted to find a way to protect the values she had grown up with, and maybe even fix the rift that had split her family. Though the path to recovery was unclear and Rebecca knew that the rift in her family would not be swiftly repaired, it was the first thing that needed to be done in order to make peace, reflect on what had happened, and figure out how to move on. The wounds were still very fresh, and there was a lot of hurt, anger, and deceit going on, and Rebecca couldn't help but wonder, could the Lamb family ever get back together? Could they ever get back what they lost? Or could the damage not be repaired? The future of Daystar and the family appeared less certain than before. However, Rebecca was certain that she could no longer remain silent. She had the opportunity to speak up, find her voice, and stand up for her family's honor and their objective today.